Our News on Terror segment tonight. 3 people have died after a truck crashed into a Crowded store in Stockholm, Sweden. Broadcasts in Sweden report that shots were also fired in the aftermath of the attack. Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven says everything indicates the truck crashing into the store is a terror attack. Take a look at the carnage.
Oh, it's probably not good.
With me now, former United States diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Liz. Glad to be back.
All right, Jim, this truck, they used a truck, they hijacked a truck, ran it into a store in a very busy part of Stockholm. Jim, we've now seen this in Berlin, in Nice, we've seen it in London, we saw it at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, we saw it in Jerusalem. This tactic has all the earmarks of radical Islamic terrorism. Yet again, once again, we're not hearing that from the media.
Well, it's Groundhog Day, Liz. You're right. I mean, this has all the earmarks. It looks very much like those earlier attacks. And in fact, as we know, ISIS has been putting out information saying use vehicles, use whatever's at hand to launch these attacks. Now, as last I heard from the news, they had not yet apprehended the driver. So it's not like the case of Khalid Massoud in London, where we knew rapidly who the attacker was and what was his likely motivation. So we can't completely rule out something like, say, that Anders Breivik massacre in Norway a few years ago. But if you had to guess from all the earmarks, it would be another one of these sudden jihad syndrome attacks.
Right, and by no means am I suggesting that we jump to conclusions here. I actually think that's a mistake that people make on both sides of the aisle. Republicans make it, Democrats make it. Nobody makes this mistake more than the media, and I want to be sure that I stay away from that. My point is, when you speculate, when you're looking for the cause or the motivation behind this attack, to say, okay, here are the options, here are the most likely options, let's narrow it down to what it looks like.
Right.
Just to say that it looks like, that it resembles tactics used before by jihadis, by radical Islamic terrorists, we're told that's Islamophobic.
That's right, and I think that's a wise policy. Find out what the facts are. Don't jump to conclusion. Play the odds. Frankly, I wish President Trump had done that with regard to Syria in the last couple of days. But that's a rather different topic, I guess.
Right, and I guess we're gonna have to see how that unfolds. But I guess going back to what happened in Sweden for a second, like I said, I can list the times that this has happened. Actually, in Al-Qaeda's magazine, they publish a magazine, they call it Inspire. They're trying to inspire these so-called lone wolf terror attacks. They tell their jihadis, their so-called soldiers around the world, to use vehicles, to use cars, to use trucks, convert them into weapons of mass destruction, to mow down people. They encourage people to use these tactics. Jim, this is the new normal. This is their tactic. This is their new war strategy. Are we just going to accept it?
Basically, yes. I think most governments have accepted this. It's part of the cost of doing business. And let's keep in mind, again, we haven't identified who this was, but let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, that's what this was. Was this fellow a migrant? Let's remember Sweden, along with Germany, has been one of the biggest open door with this very kind of left liberal, it would be racist not to let people in attitude. We know there have been really an epidemic of rapes and sexual assaults against Swedish women caused by these migrants that the authorities have swept under the rug. Remember, Mr. Trump referred to that and everybody acted like he was nuts, even though he was telling the truth. Well, you know, if we end up seeing that that was the source of this, would that make the government in Sweden reconsider its policy toward letting these people in unvetted? Probably not.
Right, and I guess I don't understand when empirical evidence became racist, because I'm going to refer to exactly what you were referring to, the controversy of a month or two ago when President Trump said, oh, look at what happened in Sweden yesterday. He was talking about the crime wave that's happening in Sweden that has been instigated by migrants. We heard the testimony from that Facebook post from that law enforcement officer in Sweden who said in the last week, he dealt with rapes, he dealt with murders, he dealt with, hand grenades, he dealt with assault, robbery, you name it. And that every one of the cases that he dealt with, the culprits, the suspects that he arrested, all but one, who he arrested on a drug charge, were Muslims from some of these terror hotbed countries. I mean, that's just empirical evidence. That's not saying, oh, I bet it was a Muslim before you have evidence. That's looking at the arrests, looking at where these people are coming from and saying, huh, I detect a pattern there.
You play the odds, Liz. You look at the evidence available. You look at the pattern. As you say, the magazine Inspire is saying this is the way you do it. And then if you see somebody acting that way, you say, hey, maybe 2 and 2 make 4. But until you get the guy, until you have more evidence, you don't jump to a conclusion. You just try to form a working proposition as you move forward.
Right. And going back to what you mentioned before, I do want to pivot just for a second to Syria, to Russia. I know you're an expert on this topic, but this is where it becomes very tricky for President Trump, I think, when he's creating his policy towards Syria, when he's thinking about what to do about Bashar al-Assad, because these same people that are trying to inspire these terror attacks around the world, like we saw in Nice, London, Berlin, Stockholm, you name it, these are the people that could take power if Assad is knocked off of his power. If we do a regime change, it could easily create a vacuum where these same terrorists take over.
Exactly right. And just in the last day since the airstrike, we've seen energized ISIS, Al-Qaeda launching new assaults against government-held positions. I don't know what it is, Liz, coming down on the side effectively of the jihadists. And frankly, look, I've seen a lot of these things over a lot of years. Again, just like we don't jump to conclusions there in Sweden, why did we jump to conclusions so quickly? In Syria, the terrorists had every reason to stage a false flag attack like this. We know they have chemical weapons. The government had every reason not to do so. Now we hear threats coming out of Washington, from Congress, from everybody. You better not do this again or else. Can you think of a better invitation for the jihadists to do it again?
Right, and I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen evidence of a false flag attack. It seems to me that it has all the earmarks of Bashar al-Assad. He's done this before. The Russians had their troops stationed at that same air base. I mean, that brings up a pretty big question, I think.
Look, go back and look what happened in Ghouta 2013, Obama's famous red line. There was a very lengthy article by Seymour Hersh pointing out the complicity of Turkish intelligence in supplying sarin to those rebels there. This has all the earmarks of that, not of government behavior.
Right, and tipping a regime change, it's quite something. The world is in flames, Jim, wherever we look. We look in Syria, we look in Iraq, we look in Afghanistan. Now we look at this attack in Stockholm. And I think you and I both know we can blame at least partially the weak leadership of President Obama that's gotten us to this point. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thanks so much for being here.